Treasury also adjusted substantially budgetary provisions from for state-owned enterprises. Left as it is, or as it was, that adjustment could have halted the operations of these institutions. But I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, through the addendum, most of these issues were actually addressed and they were reversed. Mr. Speaker, a big issue on pending bills. Pending bills are literally everywhere in all ministries. And this is a concern that was raised by members of Parliament and members of the committee, and we have clearly said that Treasury should have a proper roadmap on how to address the pending bills, because pending bills are piling up every other day. And it is unfortunate because there are people now, the traders don't feel very safe when they are also trading with ministries. So ministries should also be accountable on that. Honorable Speaker, there are also many court awards given against the different ministries, and they are piling up every other day. There should be a way of addressing this. Finally, Mr. Speaker, there is failure to prioritize completion of projects. Mr. Speaker, the committee notes that there are projects which have become a permanent feature in the budget, such as the Kenya Industrial Research and Development Institute, KIRDI, in South B, the Mitihani House, which is older than some of the members here because it is over 40 years old. Mr. Speaker, the Ronald Gara Utalii College, among other institutions, not to mention our own building around here. Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury must provide funds and complete these projects within the next 6 months. So it means the next supplementary and also the next financial year. In addition, the specialized project management unit based at the National Treasury, to the view of members of the committee, should be disbanded because they are not doing their work. Honorable Speaker, we also noticed cuts in counterpart funding. Mr. Speaker, this committee is concerned that the expenditure cuts have also adversely affected counterpart funding, contrary to the guidelines of the preparations of supplementary estimates issued to MDAs. Mr. Speaker, we also noticed that there was inadequate consultation during the supplementary budget. Mr. Speaker, given these emerging issues and other observations raised by the departmental committees, the committee notes with concern that there appears to have very minimal consultations between the National Treasury and the ministries. Departments and agencies during the supplementary process came to our committee and they were giving contradicting information from what the National Treasury was also giving us. So going forward, we seek that the National Treasury to have adequate consultation with the MDAs. Honorable Speaker, on the policies recommendation, Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, Honorable Speaker, having considered the above matters, the committee has made the following policy recommendations. 1, that within the next 6 months, the National Treasury should provide funds and a clear roadmap for the completion of all stalled projects and present this information to National Assembly. 2, that during the finalization of the budget estimates of 2021-2022, the National Treasury should set aside funds for the settlement of all pending bills and court awards. Mr. Speaker, we are reliably informed that pending bills have gone in excess of 100 billion shillings. The court awards are also in excess of 100 billion shillings. Mr. Speaker, that's a disaster in waiting. Honorable Speaker, number 3, that to avert incomplete projects, the National Treasury should request the Auditor General to carry out an audit on ongoing projects that have been affected by the budget cuts by April 2021, with a view of funding these projects in the financial year 2021-2022, or if there is a supplementary 2 coming, it should also be factored. 4, that upon approval of the supplementary budget 1, the MDAs and the National Treasury should revise their output and performance target to realign with the increase or decrease in budgetary allocation for various programs. 5, that the new projects in the supplementary budget for the financial year 2020-2021 should be deferred to the financial year 2022-2023. And finally, that the next supplementary budget, the National Treasury should ensure adequate consultation with the MDAs before supplementary changes are effected on the budget. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the financial recommendation. Having considered the above matters, the committee recommends that this House resolves to approve: 1, the supplementary estimate number 1 of financial year 2020-2021 is finalized as per the attached Schedule 1 and 2. And then 2, that the attached Schedule 1 formed the basis of the enactment of the first Supplementary Appropriations Act 2020-2021. Honorable Speaker, I beg to submit, and as I call upon my good friend, the whip, Majority Whip, to second, just to clarify and reinstate to members that the CDF funds to second. Yeah, the CDF funds have been factored and they are in this. And I call upon Honorable Wangwe to second.
Honorable Wangwe. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to second the supplementary estimate 1. And Honorable Speaker, on the onset, allow me to inform the House that the supplementary estimate 1 is brought before this House, Honorable Speaker, on the basis of reduction in revenue occasioned by the issues around COVID-19, all of which we know, the circumstances that, Honorable Speaker, we cannot rule out. Honorable Speaker, based on the issues that we have around, there is the issue that reflects in the supplementary 1 to do with salary cuts. Most of the public servants, Honorable Speaker, do you expect that there will be salary cuts, Honorable Speaker? And indeed, in the first supplementary which came before this House, before the addendum, the reflection of those salary cuts was there, but that has since been corrected. I wish to request my colleagues that when you are reading the supplementary document we have on the floor, please also refer to the addendum that came after the first one was received in the House. Honorable Speaker, there is also the issue which I would want maybe the House to be aware, the adherence to the fiscal framework, Honorable Speaker. This supplementary estimate 1 is brought before this House with strict adherence, such that all the cuts, Honorable Speaker, that may be reflecting in various state departments is strictly within a figure that has been tied and accepted to the GDP, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, it is a clean document, it is very clear, and Honorable Speaker, it can be understood that it has not deviated in any way from the figures that were determined of 8.7 to the GDP, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I wish also to clarify that various projects that had been begun by the government, Honorable Speaker, have not been reduced in terms of being calculated to proceed. Honorable Speaker, most of the members will expect that since the supplementary estimate has reduced the figures, so the projects are going to stall. Honorable Speaker, I wish to bring to the attention of the House that various programs of the government are ongoing, especially the programs in roads like Expressway, the programs in health, UHC, the programs in interior, the programs in agriculture, the programs in trade, and the programs in foreign missions, Honorable Speaker. The government is all making sure that they are all moving forward. However much the supplementary is cutting the overall budget, Honorable Speaker, but the programs of the government are moving forward, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, what should also be noted in this supplementary estimate is there are very many widening pending bills. Honorable Speaker, when the Committee on JLAC was presented by the Solicitor General, he gave us an absolute figure that the overall claims occasioned by the court judgments to government is amounting to 150 billion shillings, Honorable Speaker. That is something which this House should be seized of the matter and find out that, Honorable Speaker, the government must address in the future estimates to this House, so that Kenyans who are owed money, where the courts have expressed themselves, should be paid their money, Honorable Speaker. Rather than you go to court, you spend 10 years, you get an award, and again to get your money from the Attorney General or Solicitor General, it becomes a problem. Honorable Speaker, what is also noted in this supplementary estimates is the ballooning in incomplete projects. Honorable Speaker, there are projects, the way the chair budget has alluded to, that began about 38 years ago. There are projects which are 10 years ago, which are 10 years old. We would want, Honorable Speaker, since these projects are now reflecting at the moment, let the Auditor General give us their values, their present estimates, and evaluate all of them so that we can be able, Honorable Speaker, to know how much do they cost and what was the initial cost. For example, Honorable Speaker, there is a project whose initial cost was 3 billion, but now when you look at the final demand note from the departmental committee at the moment, is costing about 7 billion shillings. Honorable Speaker, that enlargement is what we would want to avoid. Honorable Speaker, finally, we take cognizance of Equalization Fund, which in this supplementary budget, Honorable Speaker, the fund has existed. Money was deposited into the fund for several years, but money has not been dispersed for the purpose for which it was intended. That means, Honorable Speaker, that money has been lying idle, yet the constituents, yet various counties require and voters and Kenyans need the money to be used for the purpose it was voted for. Therefore, with that, Honorable Speaker, I beg to second.
Honourable members, I propose the question that this House adopts the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the first supplementary estimates for the financial year 2020/2021, laid to the table of the House on Thursday, March 18, 2021, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 223 of the Constitution and Standing Order 243, 1. Approves an increment of the total recurrent expenditure for financial year 2020/2021 by Kenya shillings 19 billion 125 million 524,385 in respect of the votes as contained in the attached schedule. 2. Approves an increment of the total capital expenditure for the financial year
2042 on the National Assembly, C vote 2043 on the Parliamentary Service Commission. And as Speaker, as a rider, we say, I'm saying this because the consequential adjustment being made here to the subtotals and totals in the respective schedules be affected to the amendments. But I think I was just giving a brief history of this. We are aware right now, because of the challenges, and Parliament being one of the three arms of government, there are unique issues that really affect each of the three arms of government. And Parliament being the institution that it is, you know all the challenges that we are going through right now. Some of the things were not foreseen. Nobody ever anticipated that Maraga was going to issue that uncalled for actually advisory note. Parliamentary Service Commission must protect members of Parliament, and you know what that particular advisory note means. Equally, a moribund group went to court and attempted to nullify all the bills that you have passed, again, which went through. There must be a budget. Somebody else again went to court, through again another busybody, to nullify some of the basic things that you get. Again, it went through. Parliamentary service must be prepared to defend. But equally, Mr. Speaker, the chairman of the Budget Committee has alluded to incomplete projects, Mr. Speaker. And I know one of them, having been the former chair of Public Investment Committee, the Mutihani House. Mutihani House is, you are, Mr. Speaker, you are also the chairman of Public Investment Committee at one state. And right now we have the chair and other members here. We do not want this particular building here, Mr. Speaker, to join that league, that classification. And our desire as a commission, and I will say this openly, frankly, without fear, our desire as a commission, the building is being managed by by Minister of Public Works. Our desire is for us to complete that building by August. Every year, the taxpayers are spending close to 600 million on rents, jeopardizing your security, jeopardizing your comfort, because you ought to stay in a comfortable place. Therefore, removing a budgetary allocation for this particular building, meaning we are only exacerbating the challenges that we are going through. And therefore, so what we are asking you to do, right now, we are not asking for additional funds. PSC is not asking for additional funds. PSC is just asking for restatement of your budget, all items coming out of your budget for 2020-2021, period. And this is not a very difficult thing, and therefore I do not want to go into the details because I've given under subhead. Please, we know there are challenges. If this amendment is not passed, I will tell you this: the operations of Parliament will come completely to a halt. Yes, and you will not blame anybody because Parliament must function, notwithstanding the challenges. This is the mother. This is the epicenter of our governance structure, and therefore my appeal to you is: pass this, and I want to thank the Speaker for approving this. Maybe during when we'll be preparing the nitty-gritty on the supplementary appropriation bill, that is the time when we'll talk about the details. But for now, I want to appeal to you to support this. And with this, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask my colleague, Commissioner Mumanye, to second this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Mumanye.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to second what my colleague has just raised. Mr. Speaker, the Commission is mandated to take care of the welfare of the members of this House and also our staff. And indeed, we recommend that these amendments be adopted, Mr. Speaker, so that the activities and the welfare, most of the activities in this House, doesn't come to a halt. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I wish to second and recommend that the amendments be adopted. Thank you.
Honour members, let's just do one business at a time. I did give you an indication that the Honourable Kenan was to move an amendment which he has. It has been seconded. So I have to propose the question that the following amendments be effected on the schedule as contained in the order paper. A, vote 2041, which is the Parliamentary Service Commission. B, vote 2042, the National Assembly. C, vote 2043, Parliamentary Joint Services. And that the consequential adjustments be made to the subtotals and totals in respect of schedules to effect the amendments. Is that the answer? I put the question. Well, I put the question, which is that amendments be effected on the schedule as contained in the order paper. A, vote 2041, Parliamentary Service Commission. B, vote 2042, the National Assembly. C, vote 2043, the Parliamentary Joint Services. And that the consequential adjustments be made as appears on the order paper, and that the consequential adjustments be made to the subtotals and totals in the respective schedules to effect the amendments. Will as many as that opinion say aye? Aye. As many as contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. It therefore means, honourable members, the motion now proceeds. The motion proceeds to debate in second reading as amended. No, debate. I've already proposed a question. I see that the honourable. So I can see very many requests to contribute. The Honourable Duale, Honourable Duale.
No, Mr. Speaker, this is being very unfair. Some of us, we took time to research, to come and contribute to this motion. So, Mr. Speaker, as I support this supplementary estimate number 1 for the financial year 2020-2021, which is proposing a 4.3% increase in the approved budget that we did in this House of 2020-2021 by a whooping 125.6 in the form of recurrent. development vote of 59.8 billion, and 3.2 billion. Mr. Speaker, the consolidated service expenditure has increased by about 45.6 billion. And Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury, in bringing this supplementary budget, have raised a number of reasons. What precipitated the National Treasury to bring this budget? One of them, they say, is the intervention they want to do on COVID-19. Two, they are saying they want to pay pending bills. Three is because of salary adjustment. Four, there are changes which they have made in as far as projects related to development partners. And number five, the reason they're giving is the rationalization of the budget, among many other challenges. Mr. Speaker, the gainers in this supplementary, for the House will see, is Teacher Service Commission, 7.9 billion, for personal enrollment, the agriculture sector, crop department, 12.9 billion, specifically for maize subsidies. So we expect that once the House approves this and do the appropriation, supplementary appropriation, 12.2 billion, 12.9 billion will go to maize subsidy. Department of Defense is getting 6.6 billion, while the National Intelligence Service is getting 6.5. Who are the losers? The Tourism Department, 2.5. The National Treasury itself, 4.6. Department of Wildlife. So this is what's going to happen. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the committee. For the first time, there were about four subsequent years where there was arrears in CDF. Arrears in CDF. And I want to thank this committee and the chair that item has come to an end by the passage of this supplementary of 13.6 billion. It will close, and we expect the minister, once the president signs the supplementary appropriation bill, that amount of money is closed. Mr. Speaker, I really want us to do two things. Finally, as I finish, we must amend Section 44 of the PFM Act, not to allow the National Treasury to bring supplementary as we approach close to the end of the financial year. So we must bring an amendment, and I want members to support us, that we amend Section 44 of the PFM Act, that 2 months to the end of financial year, no supplementary can come. Mr. Speaker, there is total zero reduction on equalization fund, on pension. And Mr. Speaker, if you look at that, you'll see a number of projects have funded by development partners has been completely left with no money. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury must do what is called impact analysis. When you reduce a state department or an agency money, you cut their money, you must assess the impact it will have on those projects. Projects will stall. You don't just sit. So the National Treasury, Mr. Speaker, must do that. Mr. Speaker, finally, we must amend the Parliamentary Service Commission Act. We must give more powers to the Parliamentary Budget Office to do audit work, to have more legislative powers in order to make sure that this House does not lose the powers of budget-making process. The Budget Parliamentary Office is the technical arm. And I want to thank the men and women led by the director and the clerk for doing good service. Finally, Mr. Speaker, committees, where they submit their report to the Budget Committee, their input must be considered. If they are not going to be considered, there is no need of referring the estimate to the departmental committee. You can as well send it to the Budget Committee.
Member for Uriri. The member is not there.
I'm here, Mr. Speaker.
No, you can't be. You put your hand and then you...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this motion on the first supplementary for this financial year. Mr. Speaker, but I wanted to just mention a few things that we noticed while we were deliberating on this supplementary. Whereas Treasury continues to say that there's a drop in revenue collection and that we are operating during difficult times and the issue of pending bills, the truth of the matter, Mr. Speaker, is that it is not as much reflected in this supplementary as they purport, because you see this supplementary is actually increasing the spend by a further almost 150 billion. Mr. Speaker, we also did notice that there continues to be a breach in the use of Article 223, whereby Treasury spends money and then comes and seeks parliamentary approval. And I just wanted to urge my colleagues in the departmental committees to be a bit more keen on their expenditures that are done under Article 223 so that they interrogate the committees, the aligned ministries, a bit more on this. Mr. Speaker, every single supplementary, we continue to see an attempt by Treasury to cut CDF. And I want to thank the members of this House for showing Treasury that CDF is a no-go zone. Every single supplementary, they have always cut it, and they almost want to use it as a negotiating tool for all the other things that they want to put in the supplementary budget. And we do hope that this is going to be the last thing. One of the shocking things that we also did notice, Mr. Speaker, is that there was cut on salaries, meaning that the process of preparing supplementary budgets doesn't seem to have some science behind it, that it is just an arbitrary cut on an Excel sheet, top to bottom. That's why we keep on getting amendments going forward, and we have told Treasury as much. Mr. Speaker, we continue to fund state-owned enterprises. One particular one is a poster. Poster, up to this financial year, has actually been funding itself. But in this supplementary, we have actually regularized about 810 million that they have. But when we look further, Mr. Speaker, we find that Poster is still owed about 1.7 billion by the Ministry of Interior. So government owing another government agency money, and that government agency almost going into receivership, actually almost closing shop, and we continue to fund it from taxpayers. So we are urging Treasury that in the main estimates, they should be able to deduct that equivalent amount of money so that we give it to the other state-owned enterprises so that we don't continue to fund it from the exchequer. Mr. Speaker, I want to also report that the Budget Committee did a very good job, despite pressures from Treasury, to reverse amendments that had come from departmental committees, that we tried as much as we could, and almost about 98% of recommendations that came from departmental committees are actually held in this particular budget. During one of those sessions, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to report, and it's important that we go on record, that this parliament is a budget-making parliament. Treasury's role is only to give us estimates. There's always been a consistent thought from Treasury that we will only rubber stamp the things that they do from that other side. In fact, in one of the submissions from Treasury, they alluded that the departmental committees in consultations with the line ministries were consulting people who were not representing the views of government, which was a very dangerous statement. And we want to say, and I want to urge members of departmental committees that please put in your foot down, interrogate, and feel free to make any amendments, because this House is a House that makes amendments. Mr. Speaker, finally, I also want to say, to just add my voice to what the Chair has said, that many members in the morning did not understand what we were talking about. But now it is becoming very clear that we have taken care of the members' interests and ensured that not only the 10 billion that was deducted for CDF that we have reverted in this supplementary, but we have even also taken care of the arrears. So that the next steps we should now ensure is a disbursement of that full amount. And then now we just become vigilant in the next session. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I support.
Leader Majority.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. That members did ask for a firm commitment by the Treasury in terms of the disbursement schedule. I want to report here that the CS for Treasury has written to the clerk, and I have a copy of that letter, showing putting in writing what I actually said today in terms of the the disbursement program on how the whole money will be disbursed. So we have it in writing by communication from Treasury to the Clerk of the National Assembly, and I think that should put that matter to rest. We shall hold him now to account based on that commitment that he has put. So I think we are making good progress, and I want to thank members for raising the issue. And now that we have secured, we can make progress and move forward. With those few remarks, I beg to support.
Member for Funyula.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand also to support the report of the Budget and Appropriation Committee on its consideration of the Supplementary Budget 1. Honorable Speaker, it's worthwhile to note that before the amendments we have done moved by the Parliamentary Service Commission, there was going to be an increase of close to 80 billion on the budget that was approved in this just about to be concluded financial year, amounting to 4.3% increase. Honorable Speaker, of course, the most worrying thing all along is that the revenue collections have continued to reduce, yet we have continued to increase expenditure on the other hand, which actually does not make a lot of sense, but the reasons given by Treasury for the increase in the budget seems plausible in some instances, in others do not really make a lot of sense. However, the question of worry, Honorable Speaker, is the increase of the deficit from 7.5, probably now it could go beyond 9%. Honorable Speaker, that means that the deficit has to be financed by borrowing, either from the local market or...
Mr. Speaker, of the supplementary budget, I'd like to note, Mr. Speaker, that overall there should be a concern in this country, Mr. Speaker, about how we are budgeting for our economy, Mr. Speaker. The very basic tenet in economics, Mr. Speaker, whether it is for personal monies, whether it is for a family, whether it is for a company, or even for a country, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that we are living within our means, Mr. Speaker. We realize that this year we shall be drawing a budget of close to 3 trillion Kenya shillings, Mr. Speaker, whereas we are very clear in our mind that even if we put the effort that is required, we might not be able to raise even 1.2 trillion shillings, Mr. Speaker. However, because of the time that I have, Mr. Speaker, I shall try to apply myself to issues that affect the people of Dagoretti South, Mr. Speaker. In moving this motion, the chairman of the Budget Committee did provide a schedule. And in this schedule, he was showing us how the monies are being spread out, Mr. Speaker. And on this schedule, there is a vote code 1011, which is the executive office of the president, Mr. Speaker. And under it, there is a vote line, there is a budget line by the name Nairobi Metropolitan Services, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we realize that in Nairobi, unlike other counties where the governors are in place, in Nairobi we have a situation where we have the Nairobi Metropolitan Services, Mr. Speaker. And there are many questions that Nairobians are asking, Mr. Speaker. As we know, Article 10 of our Constitution, Mr. Speaker, requires that we abide to the tenets of the rule of law, democracy, the participation of the people, human dignity, and other principles, Mr. Speaker. However, with the Nairobi Metropolitan Services, we do not even understand where we stand as a county, because the legality of how this entity came to being is a question on its own. However, when it comes to money matters, Mr. Speaker, there are quite a number of questions that we raise as Nairobians. One, we would like to know, when these two governments were negotiating for transfer of functions, Mr. Speaker, how are they planning to resource these functions? Because Nairobi Metropolitan Services, Mr. Speaker, cannot exist in the office of the president, Mr. Speaker. How did they intend for these monies to be appropriated to this county through the office of the president, Mr. Speaker? The framework which would have been used to do this, Mr. Speaker, actually does not exist. Mr. Speaker, we would like to know, as the people of Nairobi, why is it that the monies that are being appropriated to Nairobi Metropolitan Services, why are they not being allocated to the Ministry of Devolution and ASAL, Mr. Speaker, where then they would have been channeled to the appropriate line ministries, because then we would have a line of reporting, we would be able to even oversight these monies as Parliament. But as it sits right now, we do not know where to follow these monies, Mr. Speaker. The same question applies for the revenues that Nairobi City County will raise this year. How will these revenues be oversighted? Because as it sits right now, NMS is not answerable to the City County Assembly of Nairobi, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are keen to know how will Nairobi City County budget for these monies, Mr. Speaker, because we do not know if these budgets are going to originate from the city, from City Hall, or whether they are going to originate from this house, Mr. Speaker. But overall, the big question of Nairobi Metropolitan Services, how it shall be financed, how it shall be operated, is a big question that the people of Nairobi are asking themselves, Mr. Speaker. So as we look at this and see over 3 billion Kenya shillings, almost 4 billion Kenya shillings going to Nairobi Metropolitan Services, we are concerned about how it shall be oversighted and how it shall be budgeted for, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to this supplementary budget, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Alego Usonga.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And I rise to support the first supplementary estimates for this financial year as ably presented by the Chair of the Budget Committee. And Honorable Speaker, I would like to make the following observations as I support. One, that these supplementary estimates ideally increases the total budget. And Honorable Speaker, we are aware that there is a lot of pressure on revenue because of what we now know as COVID situation. And Honorable Speaker, we know that the economy has not been doing very well. And therefore, what these estimates mean is that the CS Treasury will be forced to go back to the public to borrow. And we are aware that one of the things that the pressure that we are going to face as a House is to see how to manage the fiscal deficit. Honorable Speaker, I fear that we are soon going to be asked to increase the fiscal deficit, contrary to promises that we have been given by the Treasury before. I think this House must be aware that continuous increases in budget estimates have a negative effect of increasing our fiscal deficit, and this is going to be a problem for the economy. Two, Honorable Speaker, a lot of allocations in this supplementary budget are aimed at bailing out struggling government entities. There are a number of government entities that are struggling, that are not able to sustain themselves. They are not able to raise their own revenues, and therefore